of this care. So unfortunately, we will see. So we have heard the mission is committing for a long time. So we have and I thank you very much for taking the trouble of coming at this time in spite of the thank you very much. So we will before I pass on to my colleague Dr. Ahmed, I do a bit of introduction. It shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. First of all, in absentia, I guess I can thank the Honourable Finance Advisor who had accepted our invitation, but unfortunately, for the time able to come here. But I feel that's my gratitude for accepting our invitation. Next, I must thank Dr. Franziska Ohnsorge for really choosing PRI as the launchpad for the latest South Asia economic update, South Asia development update. So thank you very much. We're grateful. At some point we thought World Bank had forgotten us. So now we think that now there is some partnership still happening. Let me give a very brief intro to Dr. Franziska's background. She is the Chief Economist, World Bank Chief Economist for South Asia. She's responsible for leading the research program on key economic issues in South Asia to inform the policy debate and World Bank lending. She was the manager at the Development Economics Vice Presidency, where she spearheaded the flagship Global Economic Prospects report. That's a very popular report with the media here. They just jump on it as soon as it's published, and they do a lot of reporting on that Global Economic Prospects. The research and publications have covered a wide range of topics in international macroeconomics and finance, including debt and financial crisis, inflation and monetary policy, as well as growth in informal labor markets. She holds a PhD from the University of Toronto. So welcome, Dr. Franziska. A few more introductions. We have Dr. Hussain, who incidentally landed in Bangladesh, and I invited him to join us, and maybe he'll be able to share some of his perspectives on Pakistan. Dr. Hussain's background is interesting. He used to be a CSP officer, and early years he spent in Bangladesh, so he can speak fluent Bangladesh. Maybe not anymore. He is the former governor of the State Bank of Pakistan and also the former special advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And of course, many other high, positions he has held, including spending 20 years in World Bank, he was a director at the World Bank as well. So, and thank you for making the time. Really, we got this thing. I would also like to acknowledge Dr. Dhruv Sharma, the senior economist at the World Bank Dhaka office, who is going to respond to any questions the media might have on the World Bank's assessment of the Bangladesh. So Dr. Sharma is very welcome. We have a distinguished panelist, Dr. Fahmida Khatun, who is the Executive Director of Center for Policy Dialogue and also a senior fellow of the Atlantic Council. That's very respectable position, I think. And we have Mr. Habibullah Karim as the other distinguished panelist. He's one of the innovators. He was the first set up, I think, one of the first leading IT companies in Dhaka. And he is also the vice president of the MCCA, Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. So he's a other distinguished panelists. I have so many distinguished faces to acknowledge. I probably wouldn't be able to stop that, but maybe give. I think we have a little time. We can, you know. So let me start with the introduction, Dr. Salim Brand.
Anyway, I think this is Salim Brand. I'm also the Economist at the Dhaka University and Executive Director of Salim, a think tank based in Dhaka.
I think I have already been introduced, except that I don't look like a picture on the banner.
Change your picture.
Hello, my name is Ahmed. I'm the CEO of Speakers.
Assalamualaikum. This is Ahmed, Senior Policy Advisor, International Growth Center, former Chairman, NBR. This question, Alam, Executive Director, PRI.
I'm Ohnsorge, Senior Economist at UNDP.
I am Zaidi Hussain, and former World Bank economist.
I was speaking explicitly English as a necessity.
Nafisatullah, Director of Union.
This is Professor Honourable, President Dhaka High Study Mission, formerly I was a professor in Kuwait.
Retired and Chief Corporate Officer of the
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Kamran Rahman. I'm President of the Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Good afternoon. My name is Azam Chaudhary. I'm the Chairman of East Coast Group.
Dr. Sattar, you say that those who didn't hear, I'm Vinod Sharma. I'm the Senior Country Economist for the World Bank.
Thank you, sir. This is Ahmed. I'm representing Bangladesh Foreign Trade Institute.
Good afternoon. I think I have been introduced, but my name is Franziska. I work for the Center for Policy Dialogue.
This is Ahmed. I am Vice Chairman of the Policy Research Institute. I guess. Okay, so take this opportunity to go back. Sorry about that. Dr. Franziska Ohnsorge, Chief Economist of the South Asia region of the World Bank, Dr. Zaidi Sattar, Chairman, Policy Research Institute, distinguished panelists, and yes, salam and good afternoon. I'm deeply honored and privileged to offer some brief opening remarks on the launch of the World Bank's latest South Asia Economic Update, October 7th. There is also a Bangladesh update, which is not what we are discussing. The theme of this update, the South Asia Regional Update, is timely and relevant to the prevailing global realities and economic challenges facing South Asian countries. In particular, the challenge of job creation is of utmost priority and key to maintaining economic and social stability in South Asia, where, as we all are deeply aware, the incidence of unemployment and underemployment of educated youth is alarmingly large and growing. The specific focus of this update is how to manage the downside risks of the spillover effects of artificial intelligence or AI and trade disruptions resulting from the US tariff policy for growth and employment in South Asia. In my view, the report presents a compelling, evidence-based case for how these emerging risks can be leveraged into opportunities for South Asian countries. I think it's a very positive and hopeful. The report is rich in analytical content and empirical evidence, making the policy recommendations logical and solid. Franziska and team ought to be congratulated for sharing a fine piece of research with this audience. Moving forward, the primary challenge is to identify effective ways to support the implementation of the underlying reform agenda. Proposed reforms are extensive and implementation faces significant challenges. In the context of Bangladesh, the most significant implementation constraint, in my opinion, is the fiscal constraint. The report identifies substantial public investment requirements for conducting the reform agenda, which includes education, training, infrastructure, technology, and social protection. The fiscal constraint is binding for Bangladesh. We are acutely aware of the low levels of public spending in each of these areas. The prospect that the fiscal constraint will be eased substantially in the next 12 to 18 months is further modest. Given this reality, the key policy question is how the reform agenda outlined in this report might be prioritized. My own sense is the top priority should be given to reducing trade deficit, even if the fiscal resources required for augmenting spending on social protection, education, training, energy and transport are not readily available. But this brings me to the second major constraint to reform implementation. This has to do with the political economy of trade. Dr. Zaidi, Sattar and I have collaborated on research on trade policy reforms in Bangladesh since 2009. We also wrote a book based on research findings in 2019 entitled Bangladesh Trade Policy for Growth and Employment. Despite strong supportive evidence, there has been minimal progress on trade reform. The powerful business lobbies to be in the most from trade position, along with the National Board of Revenue, which find it most convenient to collect revenue for import, are a formidable opponent to trade reform. We have not yet found an easy way to manage this gap. Perhaps the World Bank can sponsor research on the political economy of trade reform that brings good practice international experience to help address the constraint to reform implementation. This research might be a combination of focused policy-based case studies of successful reform implementation and the underlying success factors and broad-based stakeholder consultation determination. The key to securing the growth and employment effects of trade policy and AI-related reform is the expansion of private investment. We recognize that Bangladesh's challenging investment climate demands significant reforms beyond trade policy, especially to reduce the high cost of doing business. Years of experience have shown that this is easier said than done. For example, despite numerous roadshows and investor conferences, Bangladesh has not attracted sufficient FDI. This is another implementation constraint that must be addressed. Final comment on the GDP growth projections for fiscal year 2027. Given the realities of the US economy, where signs of stagnation have emerged, the adverse implications for South Asia's growth, to my mind at least, appears understated. Sometimes the projections may not also accurately reflect country realism. As an example, recovery of GDP growth from 4% in fiscal 25 to 6.5% in fiscal 27 for Bangladesh appears too optimistic. Given the recent downward trend in public and private investment, slowdown in the growth of private sector credit, the downturn in capital import, upcoming national elections and related political uncertainty, and the observed slowdown of exports to USA owing to high tariff and slowdown in demand. I'll stop here, just giving you some deep thought and turn to Franziska for her presentation. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sattar, for organizing this. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. Back is back. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for your comment. And I love the fact that you said the top priority is to reduce trade protection. And let me give you a bit of an anecdote. We had shipped 20 of these copies. They are currently being eagerly read by customs officials. Apparently, it will take them 3 days to read these copies, at which point they might or might not release them. So, yes, I hope they take the lessons to heart from this. Just Okay, let me walk you through the main messages of this report. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for making the time. It's a privilege. I know your time is costly and you're short of it, so thank you very much for making the time. First, what are growth prospects for Asia? And then we delve into our main topics, jobs. 2 aspects of jobs. We all know the jobs challenge in South Asia. The working age population is growing about 16 to 19 million people every year for the next, until 2040. But jobs, at least in the past, have been growing about 10 million. So that's the problem. How can we create jobs? We're looking at 2 particular things. One is AI, and the other is trade. So the old, some of you who've been around in the 90s, they might remember this technology versus trade debate. Well, it seems to be coming back now, and we look at it here. And then, of course, what does it mean for policies? First, growth prospects. Growth prospects, yeah, they're slowing. Growth is slowing in the region. We expect it to slow from 6.6% to 5.8% next year. But the main message remains the same. The chart on the left, South Asia remains the fastest growing region among all the emerging market and developing economies. And you know, frankly, by emerging market standards, even 4% is a respectable growth rate. There are many who are falling below. So let me move to the next topic. The short-term prospects are too vast to downside risk. The long-term prospects, growth prospects, could be even higher, at least for some people. And that brings me to AI. So AI is a technology shock that is sweeping across the world. Every country in the world is currently doing this exercise that I'm going to show you here. We've taken the labor force surveys and we've applied a very standard classification to it. Who is affected, even at all exposed to AI, and who is exposed in a good way and in a bad way. So message number 1 here is 23% of South Asia's population, and Bangladesh is not far off that. 23% of South Asia's population is at all exposed to AI. That is fewer than in other countries, other regions, because so much of the workforce is in agriculture and in manual labor. So point number 1, actually less than in other regions. The region is even affected in any way by AI. Then the question becomes how affected, in a good or in a bad way. So the good way is that AI is complementary to human skills. So think a dentist. You will always need a dentist. But the dentist could use AI to become a better dentist. No, that's kind of what we mean with complementary. These tasks tend to require experience. They have some manual component or some emotional component. They can be So those are the complementary workers. That is 15% of the workforce in South Asia. You can see that's the blue bars here in the left. That's more than other emerging markets and developing economies, a smidgen more. But then there's the people who are currently doing tasks that are in principle substitutable by AI. So these are the call centers, these are the programmers. Those jobs account for 7% of the workforce in South Asia. And you see that's the red bar in the chart on the left, and you see that red bar is much smaller than other emerging markets and developing economies. So on balance, South Asia is actually the region that is most likely to, on balance, benefit from AI. Simply because there are few jobs that are substitutable and many jobs where it's complementary AI. Now, as it happens, those are good jobs. Anyone who's exposed to AI, the jobs that are exposed to AI, those are the good jobs. So as a result, even though 23% of jobs are at all exposed, 42% of earnings are exposed. And so whoever is exposed to AI is a good job. And AI is already sweeping through the labor markets. So there we've got a nice data set that looks at job postings. So this we can't tell whether people are getting fired, but we can tell who is getting hired. What are the job postings? And one thing that is obvious is that AI skills are extremely valuable. There's already a 30% wage premium in the slide cast data of millions of job postings. Across South Asia, of course, they're predominantly in India, but it includes other countries as well. So it's a 30% wage premium on AI skills. The market wants AI skills. And those with AI skills are not seeing much effect on their job postings, on the job opportunities. We can translate that as job opportunities. Whereas those that are substitutable by AI are already seeing their job opportunities fade away. So that is the chart on the left. Let me explain that. We group the 23% of people who are exposed at all, we group them into 4 buckets by quartile of how complementary they are. So the Q1 is the least complementary, most substitutable type of people, jobs. Now those are at risk. Q1 are the people who are at risk of losing their jobs from AI. Q4 are the people who are most complementary. So what these bars show is the change in the job postings since the release of ChatGPT in November 2022 relative to the average. So relative to the average, job postings have evaporated, have fallen by 10 to 15% for the most substitutable type of workers, the Q1 workers. These job opportunities are disappearing as we speak. The ones who are substitutable by AI. The others, the Q4 workers, the ones who are very complementary, and doesn't seem to be much significant impact. Now, who are these Q1 workers? These are, and that's the point of the chart on the right, it takes a different aspect. Instead of classifying them by 1, 2, 3, by their complementarity, we classify them by education experience. You see that it's the job opportunities for the high school graduates. Those are just a little bit, who've got a high school degree and are maybe a little bit above, but are not at a BA. Those jobs are disappearing. Same exercise, different sizing. Yeah, it's the people who are entry level, the 0 to 5 years experience. Those jobs are disappearing. So it's truly the young entry level workers who are losing their job opportunities in jobs that are highly substitutable by AI. They have other opportunities opening that brings them to trade. That takes me to the next topic, where we do a very similar exercise, but let me first walk you through the challenge. We all know that for across South Asian countries, that's true for Pakistan, it's true for India, it's true for Bangladesh, it's true for Sri Lanka, export to GDP ratios are in the bottom quartile of emerging markets and developing economies. The region is just very close to global trade. And in part, that is because of policy, high tariffs. The average tariff in South Asia is 16%. The average global tariff is 6%, less than half. Now, these high tariffs, they're intended to protect, but what they also do is to impose cost. We've matched various input-output matrices in elaborate matching exercise. And the outcome is this chart on the left. It shows you the tariffs on intermediate inputs in agriculture, industry, and services. So firms in all 3 sectors, all firms, have to pay tariffs on intermediate inputs that are more than double of what they are in other emerging markets and developing economies. You're worried about competitiveness? There's the word. It's just high tariffs to begin with. Now, in agriculture and services, some of these intermediate inputs can be substituted for workers. Agriculture is very good at that. Industry has very limited opportunities to switch out, to replace intermediate inputs with other forms of inputs. So industry is one that's really affected by these high tariffs of intermediate inputs. And that is why we call for a tariff reduction. Across the board tariff, well, carefully phased. tariff reduction. So agriculture accounts for almost 40% of the workforce. A drastic reduction is politically challenging. But a carefully phased tariff reduction that starts by reducing tariffs on the most widely used intermediate inputs is something that would benefit especially manufacturing. And the types of people who work in the jobs with the highest tariffs on intermediate inputs currently are the under 30-year-olds and the high skilled, are the young and the high skilled. So if you reduce the tariffs on intermediate inputs as quickly as possible, the people who you would be benefiting for jobs are exactly the people who might find fewer opportunities in the services industry because of AI. So that's the chart on the right. It shows you the probability of a worker being under 30 or being high skilled if the tariff is lower, the tariff on intermediate inputs is lower by 1 percentage point. So cuts in intermediate input tariffs would benefit exactly the younger and the higher skilled. So what can policy do? Policy can do two things. Let me go more into the trade side, what policy can do. So one thing is to cut tariffs. And of course, ideally, this would be done in a broader trade agreement. Now, I know currently the world is very busy agreeing trade agreements, and that's for good reason. And especially for South Asia, there is a lot of untapped potential. Look at these bars here. By the shade gives you the interquartile range for other emerging markets and developing economies. The bars show you the number for each country. What it does, for each country, it takes the trade agreements, regional or bilateral, the deep trade agreements that each country has, and counts the market share in global, the output share in global GDP of the trade agreement partners. So you can see that South Asia's trade agreement partners have very small shares of global GDP. So there is room to enter more trade agreements to get better, more preferential market access. This is called market expansion. So if you cut the tariffs to reduce costs, you can ideally accompany this by market expansion with trade agreements. Now, both AI and trade reform are asymmetric shocks. They hurt some people and some jobs and some firms, and they benefit other people, other jobs, other firms. So they require reallocation. They require reallocation of workers and of capital. Then that requires, to make that allocation smooth, it requires policy action. And to show you the potential benefits of policy action, we've run a general equilibrium model in the chart on the right. So it models a reduction in tariff and non-tariff costs, halving the gap to other emerging markets and developing economies in tariff and non-tariff costs in South Asia. And you see the blue bar, this would be nice for real per capita incomes. Real per capita incomes would go up by something like 1.25 percentage point. That doesn't look like much, but just to give you a benchmark of what it means, think of NAFTA and Mexico. When this kind of model was run for Mexico, for NAFTA, for the impact of NAFTA on Mexico, it came up with a similar number. So this is the kind of GDP gain we're thinking of. But it requires people to move, and there are job switching costs. So then we modeled this trade reform with a reduction in job switching costs, small reduction, not a big one, 5%. And you get much bigger per capita income gains. That's the red bar on the right. Per capita income gains could double if you make it easier for people to move around, to switch jobs and firms, sectors, activities inside jobs, and locations too. And what can governments do? That's my final content slide, data slide. They can make it easier to adopt artificial intelligence, so we get the productivity gains. India is actually quite ahead of the rest of the region, but also ahead of other emerging markets and developing countries in laying the foundation for adopting AI. It would benefit all countries in the region on balance because of the productivity gains. But the other thing that policymakers can do is make it easier for firms to grow. make it perhaps also easier for firms to exit so they can grow together to bigger firms. The average firm in South Asian countries, the South Asian countries have a much higher share of small firms. Bangladesh is the exception because of the government sector. But beyond that, there's a lot of small firms, much more than other emerging markets and developing economies. So these firms could be encouraged to grow by removing obstacles that would generate jobs, and the job opportunities for these firms would be in trade and would be in AI. And I'm not just talking here about labor market reform. These reforms are things like connectivity, so you can live in one place and work in another place. They're skills, because skilled workers find it easier to move. They could be housing market reform, to make it easier to find a place where you can work, to move jobs, switch jobs. So it's a whole host of reforms that just make people move around more and make firms move around and make capital move around. So all the firms that make an economy run more smoothly. And if they can be put in place as a package with a trade opening package, that would be a big growth evidence. AI is happening whether policy acts or not. It will spread. That's happening around the world. The policy action is on the tariff side. That's where the opportunities for policy lie. And to summarize the main messages, so growth prospects are robust in South Asia. The AI adoption is going to lead, should on balance benefit the region. Certainly there are already big incentives if you just look at the wage premium. But the benefits of AI could be amplified by tariff cuts and trade reform, because they would attract exactly the kind of people who are finding doors closing now because of AI, the spread of the adoption of AI. So government's role here can be to make that process smoother and less painful, easy. Thank you. Oh, there is a free lunch, almost free, but there is a cost. Request one thing that you download the report. That is the price of the lunch that we now have.
Thank you, Dr. Franziska, for a very comprehensive and very insightful report on South Asia's job prospects through the AI intervention, this new innovation that is now, as you said, spread across the globe, but not as much as one would have liked in South Asia. So there are hiccups. And one of the things that you point out, so AI is not just, it's supposed to be displacing jobs, but the displacement, I think, is overcome by the overall job creation that has taken place in previous tech revolutions that we had. In every instance, there was job displacement, but the overall job creation always counts job displacement. So even in this case, in South Asia, if AI spreads more than what it is currently, I think the job, but overall, we don't have an employment issue. The other point that I noted was when you talk about how much, what is the workforce increasing each year and actual job creation each year, and the gap you're talking about. There's a lot of migration, migration going out of, in the case of Bangladesh, in the last 4 years, 4 million workers have gone out. So that sort of eases the gap between job creation and job, looking individuals. And thank you for pointing out that the average tariff in South Asia is at 16%, which is above what we call the tariff peaks. And in the case of Bangladesh, the average tariff in Bangladesh is at 28. So, but intermediate goods tariff, I think that is one thing I will later on in my concluding remarks, I will point out what is the unique situation in the case of Bangladesh. But the only thing at this point I want to mention is when you talk of reducing intermediate goods tariffs, and that, as your simulations have shown, in the case of manufacturing, it does stimulate growth and job creation. But I have nuanced understanding of that, but because I have to look at the tariff on outputs as well. In the case of Bangladesh, the input tariffs and output tariffs there's a huge wedge between those things. And if you just reduce intermediate input tariff, then you're raising protection. And your mission here is trading protection for jobs. That means you're looking at trade openness. And if you only reduce the intermediate input tariff without reducing output tariff, you are raising protection up. So that's a point I would like to address with you. Thank you very much. It's very insightful and whatever I've read, as much as I read, I mean, this is an excellent update. Thank you very much. Dr. Ishrat Hussain is a very busy, he come here for 2-3 days and he's got a packed schedule. So he wants to say something before he leaves.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Zaidi for inviting me unexpectedly to this occasion. I learned a lot from the South Asia update, and I think a lot of things resonate with what I said. Zaidi forgot to mention that he launched my book, Development Pathways, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, 1947-2023, in 2 years ago or a year ago, which makes a comparison of the economic evolution of these three countries. So I have been interested in South Asia for a long time, and therefore this South Asia update adds to my knowledge, particularly on the AI, which I had not even considered as a variable, because 85% of the labor force in all the three countries is employed in informal markets. They are not in the formal markets. And the AI has influence mostly on the formal market. So I did not consider this, but today's discussion adds to my knowledge. Zaidi asked me to brief you about what is happening in Pakistan. We still have the second year of our IMF program, which is likely to end in 2023. And the reason is that after every few years, we invite IMF because we have a boom and bust situation. We have an aggregate demand increase, but our productive capacity is not commensurate with the aggregate demand. So this spills over into imports, and the higher imports can create a current account crisis, which then leads us either to the borrowers like the lenders like the IMF or the Chinese and Soviet Union. And that leads to a bust. And therefore, we had to come to grips with the macroeconomic stabilization. That is the important thing. But macroeconomic stabilization has its own costs because they are too much concentrating on the revenue targets, on expenditure controls, on things like imports, and the exports are not even that important. In my view, what I consider the ingredients for a sustainable growth is that we have to invest in our human capital, because that is a resource which is really going to be the precursor for a sustained growth over time. And that is which is neglected when you have squeeze on expenditures. My second problem is that the IMF programs are only interested in the total revenue targets without looking at its implications for the real economy. So 66% of the revenues are generated by manufacturing sector, which only accounts for 13%. And the other sectors like agriculture and services, traders and others who are making huge amount of money are left out. So you are actually discouraging with 45% of tax rates on manufacturing to expand your capacity. That goes back to my first question. And their exports are all being hindered because of over-regulation and high tariffs on intermediate goods. And that is what creates both the imbalances on the fiscal side as well as. But then they have their mandate which is not like the World Bank. So I want to congratulate the World Bank that their 10-year partnership program is now focused on out-of-school children, on the stunting of children, on the nutrition, on all those elements of the human capital which are needed for a workforce, a skilled labor force, and which is compete in the international world. So that is where the bank is going and where the fund is going. And that creates a difficulty because all other donors are dependent on the go-ahead signal or the seal of approval by the IMF. And if you don't abide by the IMF's conditionalities, all other lines of credit, even from China and Saudi Arabia, are discontinued. So this is a dilemma. As far as I am now no longer in the government, so but an outsider, I feel that this is what is putting Pakistan down compared to Bangladesh and India. So my submission to the authorities, I write regularly, I go to these seminars, and my submission is that they have to change their orders of priorities and they have to invest. And because of the youthful employment is one of our bigger challenges. If you don't skill them, if you don't produce the kind of skills which are needed by the economy, then you have an asymmetric output where your 25% of the graduates are unemployed. But on the other side, the demand for plumbers, electricians, mechanics, HVAC experts, and nurses and medical paramedicals and all other technical fields, biotechnology is huge. And there's no matching between the demand and the supply. So the education system should not continue to produce graduates, but produce skilled labor. And I worked on China when I was the chief economist for East Asia. And there, after 9 years, the children are allowed, based on their aptitude, whether they will go and continue with the higher education, formal, or they will go into the technical education. And look at the kind of skilled labor you have, which China is producing. And they are also producing STEM graduates. They are producing STEM graduates 4 times more than the United States. And that's why innovation and technological advancement is. So those are my few submissions. I have to go to another seminar, so
Thank you.
if you excuse me, I would have listened to the other panelists. With your apology to them, I would catch up with Zaidi tomorrow or day after. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ifrit. I'm sorry that you developed pretty. Okay. May I now invite our distinguished panelist, Dr. Pavida Khatun, and she needs no introduction. She's went on to. So it's yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zaidi. I'm privileged to be invited to speak here. I'm really also daunted to see so many economists, all are renowned economists. So I don't know why I've been chosen to speak and singled out. But having said that, I would also once again thank you and happy to speak for few issues on a few issues. I would like to thank World Bank for this timely report because this issue of AI, jobs, and trade is are so appropriate and so timely for South Asian countries, including Bangladesh, because particularly the job issue. What we have been observing across South Asia for the last 1 year, particularly, and then before also, it started from Sri Lanka, then to Bangladesh and Nepal. So these are all, if we look at the root causes of things, are basically inequality, deprivation. But why that inequality and deprivation had happened? One of the reasons is that lack of opportunity. Because South Asia is also a country, a region where young population is very high. Your report also mentioned that each year 16 million people join the labor market, but only 10 million can secure employment. So that's the reality. The South Asian countries, as we have mentioned, that it is one of the fastest growing regions. But unfortunately, this is also a region which could not generate the adequate number of employment for the young population. So broadly, South Asian region has experienced a kind of job growth. And as a result, the inequality has expanded and increased. In the case of Bangladesh, about 2 million people enter the labor market every year, but then the unemployment is high. So official numbers are not that bad, but if you look at youth unemployment, that's close to 10%, 8%. But the other indicator, which is need not in employment, education, and training, that is quite high, so about 20% or so. So this is a real big challenge. And this report has rightly pointed out that we are observing two parallel economies. One is the traditional economy, which has higher people engaged with low productivity. And the other one is the modern economy, where high-skilled workers are there, and they are more, as they have shown, that their income, they get a premium if their jobs are AI-based, around 30% job premium, and the income premium they get. So that's another, this is a good opportunity, but this is also another tool for higher inequality. That is, if it is not distributed among the youth across all classes, all economic strata, then it will accentuate inequality even further. And also talking of inequality, that would be even more and higher for the women who have less access to technology and also less skills in that. So this is, I would say that you have very rightly pointed out. The other feature of Bangladesh's labor market is that many are engaged in the informal sector. Over 85% employment is in the informal sector, which are low paid and insecure. So there is a need for huge investment in human capital. As Dr. Ishaq Hussain has mentioned, that this is one of the negative factors in areas where the government could not, because the whole reason is that lack of fiscal space, which Dr. Ahmed has mentioned initially in his initial remark, that these countries, particularly Bangladesh, has a huge fiscal space, lack of fiscal space, with a tax GDP ratio of 7.4%. The government really cannot afford to contribute to those resources because the focus is more on physical infrastructure more than the social infrastructure. So the two problems, one is the fiscal space, and the other is that lack of investment of human capital. And the third one, which we benefit from the lack of employment, is the inequality and social issues. So the interlinkages you have presented, you have framed in your report, that job, AI, and trade, they are intertwined levers of economic transformation. These, apart from the job aspects and technological impact of the job quality and income, the issues of trade, which have been really highlighted very aptly. I would say that that's also very relevant, and also it's interconnected. As your report shows, that the sectors which are facing lower tariff sectors, they are creating more employment. And the less productive sectors, unfortunately, are they're protected through high tariffs, which is not very efficient. So obviously, I'll end that is right. Just we come to the broader issue of whole governance and reform issues, which your report also emphasized that reforms in the trade issues, and particularly in the context of tariff rationalization, where Bangladesh is going to graduate from the least developed country category, and also the whole global aspects of issues related to trade regime, how it is becoming more protectionist, how and then in that context, countries like Bangladesh will have to enhance its trade capacity. Enhance its the areas of trade rules, and also you have touched upon the engagement of countries like Bangladesh in the regional trade by way of getting engaged in the regional trade agreements. So Bangladesh is slow in case of making entry to the free trade agreements. It's going very slow, but then there is an attempt now. So this is the way to go forward, to go forward, that in the coming days when Bangladesh is going to graduate and it is going to lose all the benefits or the flexibilities of NDC, it will have to chart out its path towards these other mechanisms. In the context of WTO, it is not functioning well. The countries are going for plurilateral mechanisms and bilateral mechanisms for trade integration, and Bangladesh will have to go forward to that, and for that, reforms are required. I think I would end here.
Thank you very much. You again pointed out this new phenomenon of sort of decoupling between growth and employment. And on that, South Asia is not really suffering. Large economies like United States is suffering from that. So may I invite our next distinguished panelist, Mr. Salehuddin, Vice President of the Metropolitan State Bank.
Good evening, and good all. First of all, Dr. Ohnsorge's presentation shows a very optimistic AI-powered future for South Asia, and that's good to know. Because all the time we're talking about, job losses stemming from adoption of digital tools, especially AI tools. Some estimates say that as much as 400 million jobs could be chopped in the next 5 years. But then, if you look at the Gartner study that says that there could be a net job gain of about 70 million within the same period. So it's really so I have jotted down a few points just to steer my thoughts on this. This impact of AI tools on job growth is something that has been talked about almost constant over the last weeks. And we all know that what AI tools are. They're basically self-propelled automation tools. There are different types like machine learning, deep learning, image processing, or computer vision. But how do ordinary people make sense of AI? They're basically, in every conversation around AI these days, people talk about AI agents, which are basically, even without knowing it, people use it, like Siri or Alexa. They are AI agents. We use it all the time, but people might not know that they are AI agents. People use, or vendors, companies use facial recognition. That's using AI tools. Chatbots for customer service, that is being used widely, even in Bangladesh. Translation services, recommendation engines, they all use AI agents. But what is the scarier part between all of this is the agentic AI, which actually takes it at a different level, because agentic AI has agents. It can do things on its own. and, the virtual assistants that we see, like even Siri and Alexa, the advanced features of them actually cross over into that realm of agentic AI. And even, like the iPhone, I'm over 60, so I have it enabled that if I have a call, it automatically alerts to my emergency contact number. That's an example also. So it happens without me trying to trigger it. But on the whole, I mean, I agree with the presentation by the South Asian chief economist of the World Bank. That on the whole, if you look at AI tools, they're basically just intelligent productivity. Nothing more than that. So let's not get hyped up about it. Let's not get lost in the hype about AI. But just as other productivity tools increase efficiency and reduce labor, so do AI tools. So there is no difference. But in the context of Bangladesh, what we can foresee? I mean, again, when we have so many distinguished economists around the table, I feel scared to talk about economic things. But economists say this, that 15% productivity gain would eliminate 700,000 jobs from the manufacturing sector. To 30% productivity gain would lead to more than millions of. And similarly, for AI adoption, we can see a job loss for back office workers, call centers, BPO type work, or any discrete repetitive sort of activity. What that means is, this is something that also came out in the presentation, and I'll go through that basically lower skill jobs will go down as automation replaces them. That's bound to happen. But that has some social implications as well. So higher skill jobs will face critical shortages at the same time, unless our education system, our TVET system steps up. So, I mean, we are already facing some critical shortages for, you talked about the 10 to 15 year experienced people. There is a shortage of those kind of managers here. Okay? So, I'm glad that PRI actually put the seminar around two things, tariffs and automation. And there is a double whammy when you combine the effects of the two. Again, borrowing from the lingo of economists, tariffs are a demand side shock, which can reduce exports and things like that. But automation is a supply side shock. If you increase automation, productivity increases and it reduces routine labor. And the double whammy is that demand shocks tend to accelerate off. We've seen that even in Bangladesh. So when Bangladeshi garments factories faced, opening up of quota and things like that, they actually adopted more automation in them. So the double whammy of tariffs and automation trends to adoption of AI and robotic manufacturing will reduce job growth for unskilled and low-skilled jobs across all geographies and all industries. Bangladesh is not going to be the exception. So the manufacturing job shifts that we see, you see what Ford invented, the assembly line. Now assembly line turned humans into machines. Now what we see, robots and AI tools, they mimic human behavior so well and they do it faster. So the shifts in this assembly line from assembly lines to digital swarms is inevitable. It's going to happen. We want to see that happen in Bangladesh also. So the last point that I want to, last thought rather, that I want to review with is, so for AI-based future, do we have a utopia or do we have a dystopia? So that will depend on how we take care of the labor role shifts, how do we take care of the reduce value add from manual labor? How do we take care of skill polarization? So you have more demand for higher skilled people, lower demand for low skilled people. How do we address localization? So for example, robots at 3D printing make localization and customization viability. Because we used to think that repetitive, simple jobs make things possible. And so finally, how do we coexist with robots and cyborg systems? So that means that humans must become like virtual cyborgs. And that is where I think the last point that Mr. Famida said, that 85% of our labor force is in the informal market. I remember in 1989, I visited a close friend of mine. You might know him, Dr. Zaidi, who used to be the regional director of Lives. At his house in Bangkok, when their maid came, the Thai maid came, she was carrying a cell phone. I was stunned. Even I didn't have a cell phone at that time. This is 1989.
Thank you.
And that is where I want to see happen, that even the informal labor market will adopt AI and AI.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I think it's time to open for Q&A. But as I do that, I have the senior country economist from the World Bank, Dr. Sharma, who has agreed to take questions on Bangladesh economy. They've already just released the latest update of the Bangladesh economy this morning. But he's also here to take questions on the World Bank's assessment of the state of the Bangladesh economy today. And I'm sure there are a lot of, we've got reps from the media who would like to possibly raise questions on Bangladesh অর্থনীতি কি অবস্থা বর্তমানে এটা বলার জন্য কিন্তু ওয়ার্ল্ড ব্যাংকের যিনি সিনিয়র কান্ট্রি ইকোনমিস্ট আছে উনি প্রস্তুত থাকে you can raise it to him. And so should I give Dr. Dhruva the opportunity to say something before Q&A? So you can make a very, very brief sort of introductory remarks.
Sure, thank you. I'll just spend a minute or two maybe summarizing some of the main takeaways. We launched our report earlier today. It provides an assessment of where we think Bangladesh is going in the next couple of years in terms of the economic indicators. So let me just run you through the headlines. We're expecting growth to pick up this fiscal year, to 4.8%. The previous fiscal year that just ended, it was 4%, 4.8% this year, and then up to 6.3% in fiscal year 27. So we're expecting a gradual pickup up to roughly the 10-year average for Bangladesh over the course of the next couple of years. We're expecting a moderation in inflation, double digits for the last couple of years, and as a result of tighter monetary policy, some reduction in food prices as well over the course of the last 7, 8, 9 months. We're expecting inflation to head into single digits, somewhere around the 7.5%, and then eventually below 6% in fiscal year 27 as well. Followed by, we mentioned on our report that a lot of the main driver, I guess, for the slowdown in growth in the previous fiscal year was a result of slower investment activity. Right? There was disruptions in the first half of last year, of course, with the uprising. We saw a pickup in the second half of last year. We're expecting over the next couple of years eventually for investment to pick up and consumption to pick up. And I'm focusing on these things as I'm sure you're all aware. Consumption and investment make up, a bit over 90% of the economy. When it comes to thinking about, fiscal policy, the interim government took a conservative approach. There was a cautious approach to new expenditure, particularly capital expenditure. And there was also, I mean, that was largely due to a reassessment of where expenditure can be done in a productive way, and also a reflection of weak revenue performance. Bangladesh has one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios globally. It's less than 8%. And that ratio of less than 8% is also only about half of what Asian peers have. Cambodia, Thailand, Nepal, India, China, all of them have at least double the revenue to GDP ratio. And I'm mentioning that because there was references earlier to fiscal constraints. If Bangladesh is to meet development objectives, significant reform is needed on the revenue side. And so these aspects are all mentioned in our report. We present a few suggestions for where policymakers might want to focus on for the next couple of years, with an overarching agenda of coming back to the main theme, which is generating more and better jobs. I won't I won't say much more. This was a quick summary, and I'd be happy to take questions specifically.
Sure, thank you very much. Now, as we start the Q&A, may I invite Mr. Azam Chaudhry, who's a very, chairman of a very leading commercial bank, the president of the shipping association, ship owners association, so on and so forth. He has a long list, but he represents the private sector. Let's hear from the private sector what you have to say about the South Asia update, as well as, Bangladesh economy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very privileged to be here this evening, and thank you for inviting me. I was just wondering that World Bank was running a couple of studies on blue economy, and it was a huge task. And I was there in some of the seminars, and if this could be taken, this could be a very good impact on our economy. While dwelling on those issues, I'd like to say about public investment. This is a very, very important issue. How World Bank study or a regulation can impact the governments for public investment. If you look at our, then of course we have issues like AI, how much it impacts our economy and all that. But I think public investment, if you look at today, how much actually Bangladeshis can really generate in terms of growth and opportunities. So our limitation is known to everywhere in the world. And same goes for the South Asian countries, is the demand for energy. So if you look at Bangladesh, everybody can talk about different mode of energy, but what is needed at this stage is we are importing a number of LNGs to Bangladesh, and as a immediate steps, the public spending, the government should increase the number of more procurement of LNG to support the industry, to support the economy, and then everything else just follow. So this is how it is important, because it should be taken in Southeast Asia on emotional basis. What a country needs and how to go about. If you look at Bangladesh economy, what happened last about a year, there has not been any visible direction on the level of strength that we can create in the economy or areas in which we should make an investment. So it should be ensured that the energies are paid and is made available to people in all sectors, so that the Bangladesh business can, and then of course all ratios like tax mitigation and everything will largely depend on those actions. I can give you another example. When we were forced to reduce our import by about $10-20 billion, then we should know that this impact is not 10 billion. This impact in the market is $20-30 billion. Because going to the where we are paying all the costs, vendors' cost, users' cost, and everything is going to be full tension. So once you have such a volume taken out of your total paper, this is going to impact everything, including your revenue. So this is very, very important that the World Bank should be engaging with the government on in terms of public investment that will benefit farmers. And if this blue economy is something that you have done in the past and it is forthcoming, I think it's a very, very good government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take 3 questions and then there'll be some responses and then we follow up. Okay. So, Mr. Owais, are you from the UNDP?
Thank you very much. I think there are many experts here who can talk more about Bangladesh. I have just a couple of thoughts on the South Asia development update. I think, and we all use it, we are living indeed in uncertain times, and people have said it many times. We are also short of ideas, the pathways that led to economic prosperity, and I'm talking about countries low income, middle income, and high income, that is narrowing down. And we are short of ideas, and what we are seeing are, in fact, symptoms of that, whether it's tariffs, whether it's industrial policies. We are seeing a new generation of industrial policies because the kind of a pathway we had moving to manufacturing and then services, high-end, that seems to be shrinking. And there are a number of reasons for that. And the job crisis is not necessarily new. We always had a very high unemployment rate among young people, even in developed countries. You look at Greece, Spain, South Africa, the unemployment rate was always very high for various reasons. For developing countries like Bangladesh, obviously, the challenge is, of course, the concentration. They did make that first leap, but then it got stuck and there was concentration in one sector, and that's why the spillovers were not, we didn't see positive spillovers as we saw in Southeast Asia, because there it was much more diverse. It led to growth of other sectors and services that didn't happen. Maybe protectionism was part of it, maybe that affected. And now we are seeing many mega trends. AI is one of them. And recently UNDP launched its flagship report on human development, and AI was the topic. And one of the arguments we made is it's difficult to make predictions, of course, what AI can do, whether we're going to have a net positive effect on jobs or not. But it's important how technology is deployed. Is it deployed to augment or to replace? Now, the difficulty there is that usually, historically, we have seen that technology is deployed by those who have the power, and it's the private sector. And we hear a lot, there are cheerleaders, techno entrepreneurs, and that can be a challenge because the tendency is to look for replacement, productivity, and we may not try to harness or explore opportunities for augmentation. And how we do that, I don't have solutions, but public policy should definitely focus on that, how technology can be used to augment rather than replace jobs, because there is that tendency. We are all excited, and we may not know the outcome, whether AI is going to lead us to doom or is something, we might reach some kind of a new Shangri-La. We don't know that. But I think, and there have been concerns in the past as well, this is nothing new about technology, but this time, maybe it is different because now it is challenging human, we talk about repetitive jobs and all that, but I think I don't know much about AI, but it is challenge. We thought we were at the top of this cognitive pyramid. But if indeed some of these predictions they are making about AI, I think that position of humans might be challenged in the future. So that can be it's a scary thought. I don't want to even think about it. But I think at least in the next 10, 15 years, we need to think about how the technology is deployed. The good thing, although it is a challenge, is we are facing a climate crisis.
Thank you.
The green transition might provide us a way out of this narrowing pathway that I mentioned. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zaidi, you're a man of few words, I know, but very precise.
I just want the clarification, Franziska, from you. In the beginning, you said that South Asia is going to be a net beneficiary. Is that contingent on the reforms that you subsequently talked about, particularly the trade reforms? If it is contingent on reforms, then do you have a scenario where reforms don't happen, but AI is going to happen no matter what? So what are the likely consequences? And I have another following question, which is out of curiosity. How is AI affecting jobs in the World Bank?
Now I think it's the turn of Franziska or Dr. Cruz to respond to.
May
Before
I
I
start?
move on. I mean, as you have it, I need round up.
I could speak for the last one. I think in a couple of themes, a couple of themes here that I hear. The fear of productivity gains. I think that is something that you mentioned, that is something you mentioned. Productivity gains will wipe out our jobs. So I can't tell you exactly what AI productivity gains will do, but I can tell you another example of productivity gains, which is something we have actually studied in firm level data, manufacturing firm level data for India, the ASI survey. It's a very nice data set because it allows you to track the firm over the years. The panel data set, very rare, very difficult to get. So it's a very powerful data set for exactly this kind of question. What we have studied is not a digital technology kind of productivity gain, but an energy saving technology kind of gain. We looked at which firms, what was the difference in employment creation over time between firms that adopted energy efficient technology and those that didn't. Those that adopted energy efficient technologies had significantly higher employment growth. So what they seem to have done, they've used these productivity gains to grow. Maybe they use more machines, maybe more robots, but they certainly use more employment, which is the thing that we can measure. So I wouldn't be quite so pessimistic on these productivity gains. Firms will grow if you give them the opportunity, the incentives. And yes, they might have more robots, but they will also employ more people. That was very encouraging to see. The other theme I heard was on fiscal economy, fiscal space. Thank you, Dr. Khatun, for mentioning that, because this is an important part of the trade policy reform. It's the one argument that seemed unanswerable to tariff cuts. If you cut tariffs, what will happen to your revenues? We can't afford it, we have 8%. No, it's really, 8% is very low. And it's not, Bangladesh is not low. All the South Asian countries have below average revenue to GDP ratios. It really is extraordinarily low. So how can we afford tariff cuts? Turns out, we looked at past episodes of tariff cuts since 1995. The largest tariff cuts, both in the short term and in the long term. So the top decile of tariff cuts in 1 year and 5 years. All those 33 episodes in a large cross-country sample that had these largest tariff cuts. 15% on average, 15% tariff cut, 15 percentage point. That's a large cut. What happened to revenues in that time? What happened to revenues over a 5-year interval is nothing. Trade revenues fell by a little bit, 0.1 percentage point of GDP, that's rounding error, because tariffs were cut, but trade rebounded so strongly that there were actually negligible trade revenue losses. What happened at the same time is that you had a big increase in non-trade revenues. So a concern over revenues should not be a reason to delay tariff cuts and broader trade reforms. That comes to the fiscal space. Thank you also for mentioning informality. I think you, Dr. Khatun, mentioned, I think someone else also mentioned it. Now, our data set includes informal workers, but if 90% of workers are informal, then there is almost no distinction. So we didn't make the distinction because it's almost entirely informal. Then I want to come back to one more question. Tariff cuts, will they wipe out employment? This is a shock. So this always happens. You have an asymmetric shock, you have a narrowly targeted vulnerable group that you can directly identify, because a technology shock or a trade shock will affect something that we know. What we don't know is the thing we don't know. That's the thing that will grow. So to get at that, and that's something that wasn't in the literature that we had to do here separately, is another event study. We took the same tariff cuts, the 33 episodes of tariff cuts, since 1995 for as large a sample as we could find. And we looked not just at revenues, we also looked at employment. It turns out that on average, employment rose significantly. It took a little while, it started around zero, nothing much happened. But then after 5 years, it really started significant, after 4 or 5 years, it started significantly rising below the baseline. So these past tariff cuts were associated with significant job creation. So I hope I leave you with slightly less negative view than you, and I think you also mentioned.
Thank you very much, very interesting. And if I could just bring the Bangladesh episode of deep tariff cuts in the 1990s. There was absolutely no revenue consequences, no adverse revenue consequences, even for customers. Not to mention that there were alternative sources of revenue as well. So thank you very much.
Sir, may I take one minute?
You want to come in? So I can go to the next round of
Thank you, Dr.
questions.
Zaidi Sattar, for your presentation of South Asian development update. I just refer to Bangladesh that has growth potential of about 5% of the GDP at the moment. And we have complexity of problems around everywhere. We live, our distinguished participants live in the urban areas. Let us first talk about what is the scenario of urban areas. The urban areas is not creating any sustainable growth for our living. We have tremendous complexity of problems in the urban scenario. The problem of traffic jam, the wastage of resources, human power, then we have environmental pollution. All these are creating havoc to our living standards. So how could we talk about the GDP? If I look back to our rural hinterlands, the 60% of our people live in the rural areas at that moment. You see that we are dependent on the illiterate folk who provide us all the foodstuffs. And we do not know how to live. They have environmental problems, they have no water to drink, the complexities of problems in the rural environment. Unless and until we take care of these folk, we prepare our rural settings, we prepare the small union as a centers of development. You see what Singapore has done. Singapore is one of the leading nations in the world today. It's only having only small areas of our Ohnsorge. Only one who have and then they have only one of our size, what they have done. So what we need to do, we want to organize our home from the rural homestead to union, then the Gujarat district and division levels. Unless and until we prepare a program of planned development which can generate our income, I think we will not be able to see the fruits in the future.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Media colleague কিছু প্রশ্ন করতে
media. And you can ask question on this South Asia update, you can ask question on the
Bangladesh development.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Sohail Parvez. I work for Franziska. This is really great presentation and the report by the World Bank, particularly on AI. My question to Dr. Franziska, as you have mentioned, there is a job implication for on AI of AI. My question is there any findings regarding Bangladesh? What would be the impact of AI on jobs in Bangladesh? Particularly, you know, Bangladesh has highest number of graduates, unemployment. Recently, we have a report from the Labor Force Survey, where we found that a Labor Force Survey saying 42% of our vocational training is tied to MS Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. But question, given the current level of unemployment, particularly among educated people, youth, what would be the implication? And what would be the approach of Bangladesh without affecting jobs too much? Thank you.
Dr. Salehuddin.
Thank you. No, fascinating presentation from this guy, and also looks very, very impressive. I have a couple of questions. One is that you talked about this the complementary effect and the substitution effect of AI. But did you see what, because I'll go through it, I didn't get a chance to look at it. The quality of job, especially even the new jobs which have been created, what is the quality of job, especially when it comes to labor rights and also workers' rights and different kinds of privileges? I give you the one example because it's my association with the labor economist in this region. One of the major concerns which is raised by the Indian labor economists, especially with respect to the rise of the platform economy, where the algorithms are not in favor of the workers. It's very much in favor of both the designers. And that's why there are complaints against, overwork, highly stressed time, and also not being paid properly. So despite that, you may have premium, but if the quality of job and quality of life doesn't improve, then whether that has been kind of covered. My second point is that you're right that the transition is taking, and especially the direction of AI. Maybe since it's so dynamic, the adoption rate or the picture will change very dramatically. For that we need more high frequency data to understand. But I fear for the country like Bangladesh, especially the transition cost may be too high because the economy is not diversified and it's not kind of resilient to different kinds of shocks. So that's why, while your South Asian average may look better because of India's presence, but I'm not quite sure about Bangladesh. I fully endorse some of the concepts which have been raised for Bangladesh. My third and final point is that I fully agree with Dr. Sattar when you mentioned about cutting down the intermediate tariff because probably we are missing the bigger picture. Is the effective rate of protection is mastered on that? So I don't really want to elaborate on that, but I just want to add one thing that I would again look at the report, but just asking you, was the report highly focusing on the tariff issue? What about the other non-tariff issues, the trade cost? And that can make this effective rate of protection kind of, very high and unmanageable. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In my closing remarks, I have a chart to share with Franziska, and you might have to respond there. Okay, so we have a couple of questions already. Would you like to address?
So I think there are a couple of questions on infrastructure in Bangladesh and on urban areas and their potential to generate or destroy GDP growth. But I think my colleague Dhruv is best placed to answer because he's just the report has just got a special feature on urbanization and how to make cities work for growth. It's actually a really interesting feature. The proof, I'll hand over to you after. In general, infrastructure is key to using opportunities. I agree with you. Especially in AI, if there is no access to the AI, the digital infrastructure, it's difficult to make use of AI. So that is kind of a critical condition or a prerequisite for getting the gains, the productivity gains that AI should generate. Now, Bangladesh is like India in the sense that the number of people who should, in principle, if they have access to it, benefit from AI, is much larger than the number of people who are substitutable. In principle, but of course, you're right. It depends on being able to actually use it and make use of get these productivity gains. So I share your concern there. The quality of jobs, it's a good question. We don't have the data for the quality of jobs, but the wage premium is clear. The wage premium is clear both in the complementary jobs, where it's really high, but it's also clear in the substitutable jobs. So it seems to both the jobs it creates and the ones it substitutes. These seem to be the better jobs. It's more like a shift within the better job universe, rather than destroying one type and improving the other. And non-tariff barriers, I would love to do the same thing we did for tariffs. The beauty of tariffs is that you can go by sector. And you can do a big matching exercise between a labor force survey, the input-output tables, and the tariff schedules. That's not really possible with non-tariffs. But as I started with that story of all these customs officials who are now reading this beautiful book for 3 days, non-tariff barriers are, of course, just as important, if not more important, than the tariffs. And with that, I hand over to you.
Let me address the question about urbanization. The other report, besides the South Asia Development Report, the Bangladesh Development Update, we split that into two parts. One is our economic assessment and one's a special focus. This edition, our special focus looks exactly at some of the issues that you raised, sir. So urbanization, growth centers in Bangladesh are typically centered around Dhaka, Chittagong, and we're seeing evidence that industrial activity, urbanization is spreading down south to Cox's Bazar, up north to Sylhet, and to a certain extent, even Rangpur. But there are regional disparities which are now showing up in quite an apparent way. Job generation, job creation is not matching the scale and intensity of this development either. So there's a big mismatch, and you're right to point out that beyond these urban centers, not much else is being generated outside, despite a large share of the population being employed in non-urban, non-industrial areas as well. You mentioned at the end of your remarks that there's a need for a special focus on spatial development policy. We mentioned that as well. Right now, evidence shows that the development and urbanization has happened in a sort of organic and unorganized way, shaped largely by market forces as opposed to regulation and special planning. So we're also suggesting that in future, to decongest some of these growth centers, spread the gains of development and growth a bit more widely. Special attention needs to be placed on spatial policies. There's a lot more that our experts in urbanization have written about in our report, so I'm sure we can share that with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I now invite President of the Metropolitan Chambers, Governor Rahman, please. He's been waiting patiently.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't actually waiting patiently to answer questions. However, since you have given me the opportunity, I can see there's no going back from AI. We have to go in for it. But productivity gains from AI will certainly wipe out some jobs. Whether we are still going to have a jobless growth like we have had in the past, or are we going to have some job growth?
That is the question. Now, there's no one size fits all over here. You know, if you look at the Bangladesh labor market scenario, we have a total labor market of around anywhere from 65 to 75 million people. And as has been said earlier, 85% of it is in the informal sector. And most of the jobs held by the informal sector are probably unskilled jobs. And we are also sending workers overseas, mainly to the Gulf countries, and mainly without any skills. That is actually hindering prospects of further job growth in the migrant worker sphere. Here in the country, I am severely concerned. I'm really concerned about what number of jobs are we going to replace by AI, and whether we will be able to send people overseas in the future. That is also something that we need to be concerned about, which would certainly require skills training. We need to reskill our workforce also. And unless we do that, I think we'll be in trouble. And I think I don't need to add anything further today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Any more? Colleague, media colleague,
Well, changes that for foundation. And well, what I want to say is not related to economics, but it might become vital for economics and for society in the long run. So it's regarding the AI. What we see that AI is generating text, right? And we are adopting that text. So the moment you read the language, we just don't read the language. So our mind is functions like a language, right? So the moment you talk, we talk in the language. And what fear I have, well, my heart is pounding because I'm really little and the room is filled with all the person. So yeah, the thing I want to mention that the fear is that we might adopt, or the later generation, the younger generation might adopt the AI language. So now we can currently distinguish between the human language and the AI language. But since they're going to adopt the AI language, the fear I have, because they are continuously reading that thing, so their language pattern might become synonymous with the AI language. So that moment is problem with that thing that it will be hard to distinguish with the tiny thing that how to whether it's a human language or it's the written language. It is written by the AI, right? So that particular thing also has one other problem, that their thinking pattern, since they are reading the AI language thing and how it is generating the text and how it is formulating and structuring all the ideas and any other reports or any other things. So its thinking pattern, its generating pattern, and humans' thinking pattern will become more synonymous. So I think this becomes a moral paradox, and it is not only we are feeding the AI is feeding itself through us. So it is reflection, it's a different kind of reflection it will get. So the problem is that whether do we want it, this kind of thing, and how it will impact the productivity, those who are the youngsters or the next generation. So that will be a vital thing.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody from this side? We haven't had any questions from this side at all. Anybody? Nobody, it seems. So I can probably go to the final part of our program, which is the closing remarks for another 5-6 minutes. And you have
Sorry, I actually didn't get back to you on your question. And I think it leads also to your question. It's about the implication for youth. And maybe that also goes into your question. What does AI do? Because that is one of the things that is clear in these overlapping, in these classifications. The kind of jobs that are complementary tend to be the kind of jobs that have judgment in it. Judgment is something that builds over experience, that you know years of mistakes give you judgment. So that's why it's these more experienced people who benefit from it. And that is difficult when the jobs disappear, especially the entry-level jobs. But these are the entry-level jobs that we know today. Every generation of technology change, fundamental technology change, has brought new entry-level jobs. Like the robots, everyone was worried 20 years ago that they would wipe our jobs. It hasn't. We work with robots and we are better for it. You know, we have fewer accidents, we work better with our robots. It has created more jobs over the years. So the productivity gains are probably, South Asia is well placed to net benefit simply because it differs from all the other emerging market developing economy regions by having a larger number of people who will have the productivity gains than those who are at risk of losing a job. Much larger, twice as large. That is really unusual for emerging markets. South Asia can count as blessing actually. On migration, migration is actually a strength of South Asia. That diaspora, if someone could use it to bring back knowledge, to bring back savings even the unskilled, bring back savings, they bring back networks, they bring back links that could be used for trade, for investment, but that will not be used if it's such a close, so difficult to do international business.
I have a question now. It's a policy question. And it's a policy sequencing question on the AI and its activities. There are two policy sequencing options. One is innovate and regulate later. This is the policy practice by USA and China. The other option is regulate and then innovate. This is what Europe has followed. And really what we see is that Europe is way behind in this AI technology, way behind. Have you thought of what policy sequence for South Asian countries like to adopt? Then they have a choice.
So this is a nice way of putting it. No, we haven't put it in this way. But I think the AI is going to happen regardless. People will find a way of accessing it. It'll find its way around. Even if it finds its way through the firms first before it gets to the household. It'll come. The question is, can there be other things that governments can do to offset whatever disruptions it brings? And that's why we're so hopeful about trade policy. Opening the economy to a whole new engine of growth. And
Thank you very much. So let me now take less than 5 minutes, just give a very brief closing remarks. And I'm very impressed by the fact that you brought in AI, linking it to jobs, but at the same time saying that bringing in trade reforms would amplify the job creating impact of AI. That's fantastic. So this is a great idea. You're not talking of trade reforms just like something else, but it's linked to AI and job creation as well. Let me go to one particular feature that you have introduced in this update, which is about the manufacturing sector can be stimulated through further reduction in intermediate input tariff. And I'm a bit concerned why you just left it there, because we've got output tariffs, and you acknowledge that these South Asian countries are all protected, high protected countries with highly restricted trade regimes. So and high protection, effective protection, which is, and I'm just bringing out the Bangladesh situation from 2000 to the current 2025. The average tariff on output, basically, it's consumer goods that we protect. So in the case of Bangladesh, and the average has been, rising. There has been no tendency for the average output tariffs to fall, except in the 1990s. There was a sharp decline in average output tariffs. Input tariffs are much lower, but still higher than tariff paid. The average input tariff, intermediate goods input tariff, is 17% compared to the average output tariffs of 42%. So there's a wedge of 25%. It's a big wedge. You don't find that, of course, not in all South Asian countries. In India, the intermediate goods tariffs and the output tariffs are much closer. There's the escalation, tariff escalation is not that high. Now, in this case, if you just talk about reducing intermediate goods tariff, then your main theme, which says trading protection for jobs, but in this case, I guess you're implying that trade openness creates jobs, but if you raise protection, in this case, if you reduce intermediate goods tariff, you raise effective protection. I think this has been discussed. So that is not going to help in my view. So unless you really, and trade reform would have to include scaling down. Thank you. And in the case of Bangladesh, it's absolute.
We actually call for it, but it doesn't tie so neatly to, jobs. What it does show is that the output tariffs are highest for parts of the labor market that are shrinking. If the parts of the labor, 3/4 of employment growth were generated in activities that are tariffs below 5%, output tariffs below 5%. So it's a large but shrinking part of the labor force that is very protected by high output tariffs. So, but we do call for it.
Very, very interesting. Okay. So we can continue that. Thank you very much, Ahmed, to all of you who have been patiently listening to whatever stuff. And I hope you've had a very useful exchange of views and this South Asia development update. In my view, this is a remarkable, and I'm fascinated by the fact that we brought in AI and trade reform together. Thank you very much, Franziska. Let's give her a applause. Thank you very much. And after the show, I take the and there is some refreshment. We invite you to